Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ask Eric the Conductor. My name is Eric, right there. And on today's program, we have 3 questions, and all of them are from the East Coast, or that's what they say. They didn't say specifically, I think, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PI, or Newfoundland, Labrador. But anyway, let's get into them right away. First of all, from Catherine, we have, is classical music from a certain period of time, or is it still being composed today? Great question, because it can be confusing. Sometimes we talk about classical music and we often think about just the old times. And that is true. There was a lot of music written, 3, 4, 500 years ago, starting with the Renaissance and all the way up, what we call classical music. But classical music is ongoing all the time. It's a living art form. There are many wonderful, incredible composers composing wonderful works as we speak. And they're on, I think, should be on more and more orchestra programs. But there's wonderful new music. And today we we switch between classical music, the name classical music, and composed music. Also, it can be confusing with the names because there's a period of classical music called the classical period, which is very confusing as a kid or even like growing up or even now, I think. Why did that happen? Well, it's not just because of music, it's because of other eras. But we've got Renaissance, then we've got the Baroque, we've got the classical period, and then we have Romantic and modern, etc. And it goes on contemporary like that. And so the classical period is around from 1720 to about 1810 or so. It's not about 1750 to 1810, 1820, somewhere around there. It's not exact, but it also lines up pretty much with literature eras, with architecture eras, etc. So it's not an exact thing, but that's why we have that name classical in the whole classical music thing. So hopefully that answers your question, Catherine. Our next question we have, what are the most common pieces of classical music used in movies in the last 20 years? Thank you for this. I think this is from Robert. And okay, there are a number of them. I'm not going to list, 20 of them, but let's do around 10 or so. One very, very famous one is Also sprach Zarathustra. This is a work by Richard Strauss, made famous in terms of movies with Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. And you know this music, when you hear it, it's dum, bum, ba, da, da. And then the timpani goes dum, bum, 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 bum. And it goes on and on. It builds up with that theme. Now, the interesting thing about this is in the movie, it's only used, there's only a small portion of the music is used, but in reality, there are a whole other chapters in this musical piece that are wonderful. Richard Strauss wrote something called tone poems. They're not necessarily symphonies, they're more storytelling in music, and it's a whole one complete piece with little different chapters along the way. And that is a very famous one of his. Another one is Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries. This was used in Apocalypse Now, where I don't know if I've seen the film, but I think it's set in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and it's bum ba da bum bum ba da dum dum da da dum dum da da. And of course, this is originally from an opera, one of Wagner's opera, and from the piece Ride of the Valkyries, of course. And this was used, I think, to great effect in that movie. Another one is Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. This was used in Die Hard, A Clockwork Orange, and Mr. Holland's Opus. Another one is In the Hall of the Mountain King by Edvard Grieg. This one is Bum 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 bum. And it gets faster and faster and faster. It's a very short piece. It's very, very effective. And they used it in The Social Network and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Let's just do two more. Spring from Vivaldi. His most famous piece is the Four Seasons, and Spring. Dum bum 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 ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum bum bum ba-da-da, ba-da-dum ba-da-dum bum 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 ba. This has been used in many movies. Runaway Bride. Do you remember that one? That was from, I think, the early 2000s. Julia Roberts and... Is it Julia Roberts or Julia Roberts? I forget who else. Let me know. He's got white hair. Anyway, it was that was years ago, but the Spring from Vivaldi is often used when a TV show or a movie denotes something very classy. Then they'll put on Vivaldi Four Seasons. It's a beautiful piece of work, and so there's that one. And then let's do the Blue Danube. This is the famous waltz by Johann Strauss II. Da 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 dum, bum 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 bum, ba da da da, etc. etc. This is also used in 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think it's when they're spacewalking. I'm not sure. That's from many, many years ago, and I'm not even sure if I've seen it completely through. But anyway, those are some great examples of classical music used in movies in the last 20 years. Oh, in the last 20 years, Space Odyssey was way before that. I'm sorry, Robert. I have gone over my time limitation there in terms of years, but hopefully you don't mind that. Okay, the next question we have is, what are the main composers someone should have some general knowledge about in order to win at Jeopardy when the category is composer/classical music? Great question. I love Jeopardy. My wife and I, Karen and I, we love to watch Jeopardy. And whenever a classical music category comes up, we're like, okay, here we go. And some great composers or some composers that one should know just for Jeopardy. You gotta know the big ones. So from the Baroque era, this is around from 1680, 1670 to 1750. We've got Johann Sebastian Bach, big one. I'll be Bach. And Vivaldi, we just sang Four Seasons. Those two are major, major ones from the Baroque era. Then from the classical period, we've got Joseph Haydn. Haydn is called Papa Haydn. He was the kind of the start of the string quartet and the symphony in certain ways. And then Mozart. Mozart is one of the most famous classical composers. You can't forget him. Then we've got Beethoven. Beethoven came after them. He transitioned between the classical and the Romantic era. Wagner was a big influence on classical music. Debussy, the French composer. Igor Stravinsky, very famous 20th century composer. If we've got those 10, you've got a good grasp of things. But let's name some other composers. Brahms is probably good to know. Mahler, Rachmaninoff, Gershwin, Shostakovich. Throw those in there and get to know some of the most famous pieces and some stories about them. You'll probably have a good chance of answering a lot of those Jeopardy classical music questions. Now, opera is a different category. Those are often in a separate category. You should brush up on those. But hopefully that will win you some answers. And that was from Joshua, also on the East Coast. So thank you, everyone, for those questions. And if you want to know more and get some more insider tips and just have a lot of fun, the Joy of Classical Music, please join the Joy of Classical Music Facebook group. That's where I put in different things, some polls, like some questionnaires, some fun facts, videos, etc. It's a really good time. And we will see you next time.